So, guys, I want to have a beer with you, and I want to talk about AEW Forbidden Door. And I want to say it was a little bit different for me because, I was going to go to the UK, but unfortunately I had to work. So, I spent a few days actually watching Forbidden Door, like watching it again, watching some matches, taking some notes, and other things like that. And I also want to mention for those who review professional wrestling, like sometimes when you go to the live shows, I've learned that when you want to review it, you should do something like, order the pay per view afterwards and then just, spend a few days watching the matches. And it's okay to just, post your final review like a few days after the show because you want to, like, have some thought about it. And I do want to say that AEW Forbidden Door for me was a strong show. It's kind of like what I've said. It really was their WrestleMania Night 2 or something like that because they wanted to do an excellent show in the UK because honestly, they really just had to make this a great show so people are like, I want to go to Wembley Stadium next year and I want to do a great job, really. So that's their number one mission. And then I also said, too, that the big concern about the show is ultimately they had a very controversial ending that they did not need to make. And they also did something where I'm concerned about what All Out, Wrestle Dream, All Full Gear, and their summer show is going to be like, really. World's End, because they have to keep making stronger shows. They need to keep building momentum. They need to be a rival to the WWE. It is sink or swim time for AEW. So ultimately, what do they do, really? So I'm going to go over all the matches and enjoy a good beer with you guys. So I want to talk about the main event match first, which was I'm gonna call it Team Osprey versus the Death Riders. So there was a lot of really cool spots in this match, and definitely, I do appreciate Hiroshi Tanahashi getting the pinfall because obviously he's a New Japan guy. This is a New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW coming together. So obviously that made sense, really. There was a lot of really gnarly spots, like, Gabe Kidd and Darby, falling off the top of the ring and going through the tables. I thought it was Mick Foley. I thought it was imitating the Mick Foley spot, but it was more like the Shawn Michaels spot. When he saw Wheeler Yuta climb the cage, he gets pushed off and he falls into the Japanese announce stand. There was some issues that I had with this. That the spot where Darby was being stabbed in the ear with a fork, that was unnecessary. But what I appreciate about that was it was minimal because it wasn't like they did cinder block spots and other things on top of that. That was almost like we're gonna make it violent, but that's how far we're gonna make it violent, and that's how far we're gonna go, and then we're gonna move on to other stuff because obviously, just like with All In, a lot of eyes are on this pay per view, so you can't make you can take it far, but there is a limitation you need to have because if you overdo it, you're gonna turn off people. So you have to make it violent, but not way too violent. That's important. The next thing that I will say is that I didn't like the Young Bucks doing their comedy in this. They did something where where after you had a very serious and emotional promo of Will Ospreay narrated by his fiance Alex Windsor, you had the Young Bucks come out and they have by Hamden play. I think Hanson play. So it's almost like you took that very serious and emotional moment and then you kind of just threw it away because you wanted to do a joke with the Young Bucks. And later on in the match, instead of having thumbtacks or broken glass, they have gummies. So, and I also think they had on their title entrance Rod and Todd to make a joke about them. But the point of it is that, again, it's always like I said, even if the crowd is into it, there are certain times when you have to say, stop the comedy and other things like that. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to move my leg just to make it more comfortable. I hurt my leg at work. But there are certain points when you have to stop the comedy. There are certain points when you want to do something very, very serious and make it mean something. And then and a few minutes later, you're doing comedy and you're fucking it up, really. So it's not appropriate, really. And I always say to ask myself, even if you're getting the crowd to laugh, really, that's good. When when is it more about the wrestlers entertaining themselves or them entertaining the crowd? And I also kind of say the other thing too, really, is is really just thinking about the moment. This is really about revenge on the Death Riders and other things like that. So, what what does that do really when you kind of put in comedy shit? And then the next thing is that the ending, Will Ospreay gets a post match beatdown the by the Death Riders. So it's bad because you took a very emotionally powerful moment. You had Ospreay be the king of the night, really, and now you kind of put it on Moxley. So you kind of moved it to Moxley. Then the other thing about that was, not a lot of people are happy with it. And then also too, that was a good send off to Wembley Stadium with Ospreay just with Ospreay just saying, hey, he's going to take some time off to heal. He has to do some surgeries. He's going to be back next year, hopefully for Wembley Stadium. That's going to be his goal, is to be back at Wembley Stadium. That's what you should have done. You shouldn't have done him getting a post match beatdown. And one of the reasons why you don't do that is because also too, you just have the Texas Death match. Now you have the Lights Out match. Are you going to do Blood and Guts with Team Darby versus Team Moxley? Isn't that a little repetitive? I think that Forbidden Door, I think for All Out, they should do 5 women against 5 women. And they're kind of hinting at that, but that should be the one that they do instead of, okay, here's the same cast of characters in an ultra-violent match. Oh, we're going to do a continuation or something like that, really. So there has to be a point where they know the Death Rider thing has not been working. It's been drawn out for too long. Why are they drawing out the epilogue? It has to end, and there's nothing more that they can do except get to Eddie Kingston snapping Moxley out of his mentality round. That's the only thing that they can do with this. But for right now, all it does is piss off the audience by continuing and having their favorite wrestlers get beat down by the Moxley faction. So it was not a good ending. It hurt it. I actually gave the main event like 3 out of 5 stars. Good spots, stuff that will go down in AEW history, but ultimately that post-match ending hurt the match. So I want to open... so the opening was Adam Copeland and Christian Cage versus Luchasaurus and Kip Sabian. I was surprised to see that open, and I was actually saying to myself, I felt that was a little self-gratifying, but then I said, people saying Adam Copeland's opening, so, what do I know, really? You want to get the crowd excited, so you get to something that hooks the crowd, so okay. And then they announced that there were 17,000 people. Later on, they said it was 19,000, and they showed really great shots of the audience to say that this motherfucker was packed, really. And I was saying to myself, I wish it was Nick Wayne because it would have worked a lot better. Like Kip Sabian, he always loses. He looks like a ripped off Johnny Depp, really. So Adam Copeland and Christian Cage do a side slam, do a double side slam on Kip Sabian. Luchasaurus does a thrust kick on Adam Copeland. It looked vicious. Luchasaurus does a power bomb on Kip Sabian, where he's throwing Kip Sabian on to Adam Copeland. He does a choke slam on the ring apron to Adam Copeland. And I was saying to myself that Mama Wayne did a great job this match. I like how she was talking. She was getting in the way. She was really experimenting with her character, being a bitch, and being I want my boys to win, but I'm also going to make sure that if I can help them out anyway, really, So I really think that I appreciate her doing something new, really. She's not standing around there and doing nothing like Marina Shafir. She's actually trying to play her role of just being a bigger bitch than Kyle's mom. Kip Sabian has blood bleeding from his eye, that comes out of nowhere. Luchasaurus accidentally helps Edge do a European uppercut on Kip Sabian. Christian Cage does a top rope dive on Luchasaurus. Adam Copeland and Christian Cage do a power bomb and diving headbutt combination. And I believe that was on Kip Sabian. Adam Copeland spears Luchasaurus out of the ring. Adam Copeland and Christian Cage speared Kip Sabian after hoisting him a little bit above the air. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars because really the story of this match was if Luchasaurus and Kip Sabian and Mama Wayne are on the same page, because Luchasaurus came back. He was bullied by Nick Wayne and Kip Sabian. And I believe Mile Way also bullied him as well, really. So it's almost like, where is Luchasaurus going, really? So I didn't like that because that wasn't articulated that well. They should have had more story leading to that, or they should have had backstage segment like, you better do yourself, you better do right, Luchasaurus. Mom Wayne slaps him to motivate him to do better. You see some question, really. They could have just established that a little bit more. It could have been good, really. So I give it 2 out of 5 stars. And then obviously that Luchasaurus loses. He has muscle, so obviously they're going to lose to Edge and Christian. The next match was a TNT Championship match. Unfortunately, that was when I fell asleep, really. And I've been falling asleep a lot during the professional wrestling shows. So sometimes a match could be boring, really, or sometimes it's because I work a lot of hours, really. So when I watched this match, this is why I had to spend a few days just rewatching all the other matches because I fell asleep during this one. It started a little slow pace. I'm not a fan of wrestling matches that start slow. I want them to kind of have a lot more energy in the beginning. So it made me fall asleep, really. Towards the end, I saw a Snapdragon, a Michinoku driver by Kyle Fletcher, second rope avalanche, back suplex, and a Liger bomb by Kyle Fletcher. Kyle Fletcher does sheer top does a sheer top brainbuster on Hiromu Takahashi. I did give this match a little bit of a chance. I watched this a little bit, and I kind of said to myself again, too, that it was a good showing of Kyle Fletcher, but ultimately it was a match that did put me to sleep because they started a little too slow, really. So I'm going to give it, at least a 2 out of 5 stars because there's some things that I liked and there's some things that I didn't like. And then also, when I was watching the show, I just started by watching the matches that I really wanted to see, really. So the rest of this is a little out of order. So the next match that I reviewed is Okada versus Swerve Strickland. It starts with reversals and counters, and then predicting each other's moves, really. So it does show that, they have a good rivalry with each other. Swerve does a backflip over the ring ropes and onto Okada outside the ring. That was really fucking sick. Okada does a catapult. Swerve escapes by jumping over the ring rope instead of crashing into it. So, I really like how they can, counter each other's, spots and all that great stuff. Because, it does show that, they're on the same level. And it also shows that they know each other very well, really. Or they've done the research on each other. So, this is good. Okada does a Deadeye. Swerve does a flatliner and then a vertical suplex. Swerve does a top rope Samoan drop. Okada does a pile driver on the ringside area, then a top rope elbow drop. Okada does back-to-back drop kicks. And then also he does a missile drop kick and a house call into a Rainmaker. And at the end of the match, really Okada and Swerve were trying to counter each other with finishers. And then Okada, as I said a second ago, he does a missile drop. There was a missile drop, there was a house call attempt, and then there was a Rainmaker. So they were kind of countering each other, but Okada got the upper hand. It was 3 out of 5 stars. They really established that they make good rivals. There could be a potential rematch when Swerve gets better. And I also appreciate that there's no cheating or interference by the Don Callis family. And I appreciate them, as I said, the story that they told was that these guys were really great at countering each other. So I would give it a 4 out of 5 star match, and 4 out of 5 stars means I drink. Coors Banquet. So, the next match that I reviewed is Athena versus Toni Storm. And I wasn't sure what her makeup was inspired by. Toni Storm, she reminded me of Amadeus or Barry Lyndon because they have that kind of that aristocratic type of look. And then I was also saying maybe Alice in Wonderland because I know with Tim Burton and Alice in Wonderland, his version, you saw people with all those Victorian face with those excessive white masks. Athena misses a drop kick at the beginning. Toni Storm hits a drop kick, and she also hits a tombstone pile driver on Billy Starks. Makes a lot of sense because Billy Starks is ringside trying to do some interference. So she just takes her out. And I also appreciate Billy Starks. One, because she's fucking hot. The second thing is that because she's fucking hot. And the third thing is because she's fucking hot. And then also she did a good job of just selling that because obviously she's like a rookie. She comes off like a rookie. So obviously when a wrestler like the TBS champion hits her with a pile driver, she's going to be down out for a while. That makes a lot of sense. Athena hits a drop kick, turns, and it turns off the barricade monitor, which was kind of funny, really. Tony Storm hits a jawbreaker. Tony Storm hits a fisherman suplex. Athena hits a neck breaker and butterfly suplex. Athena, through the match, she was a little too celebratory for my taste, and I don't like that in professional wrestling, where it's almost like you're in the middle of a match, and you're almost like saying, okay, well, I'm against the champion, and I think I think that I can beat this person who's been champion for such a long time. Really, like I think she would more have a killer instinct instead of just, well, I'm going to be celebrating or I'm not going to take this too seriously. I think that Tony Storm was doing a lot in this match, so that just dynamic didn't work. It's almost like Athena should have treated Tony Storm like a fire. Like, I got to keep giving everything I have to put it out, really. I'm not going to be celebrating too quickly. Like, once I get the title and the 3 count is done, that's when I celebrate. So I felt that dynamic did not work. But it did show that she was a little too, what's the word? She was overconfident. I would also say that Tony Storm followed up with a pop-up powerbomb. Athena hit a back suplex. Tony Storm did a tilt-a-whirl suplex and tiger driver. Athena did a second rope Hurricane Rana, Liger bomb, suplex variation into a submission of a Koji clutch. Once again, the problem is that if you hit a tiger driver, that's almost like a mix of a power bomb and a pile driver. Like, that needs to be a finisher. You can't have a bunch of moves after that because that's kind of like really, really stupid. It's like, again, if you did the Undertaker and he did a pile driver onto somebody or onto a barbed wire board or onto thumbtacks like he did with Mankind, that match wouldn't be going like a little bit longer, really. Like, tiger driver is one of those finishers that after you hit it, you know, good night Irene, really. It doesn't make sense for somebody to keep going and going. Tony Storm throws Athena into the barricade monitor, and then the monitor goes back on. Tony Storm hits a Storm Zero and then a pile driver. Athena taps out to a submission. And I gave the match like 4 out of 5 stars. I did not like that Athena tapped out. And I also think that it's controversial because it's Athena versus Mina Shirakawa at the ROH pay-per-view next week. But I do think that with Mina Shirakawa and Athena, Athena should really cross a line, and they should have a rematch. Tony Storm, Athena, and Mercedes all out. Like it's like the winner takes all type of thing. And then you could do something where if it's Athena or Tony Storm, they do something where they just are like, you know what, I'm gonna take these 2 other titles, put it in a tournament, and that be that, really, and hold their original titles. And hold the women's title, like whoever, and that's how they should do that. I think that it's but also too, having Athena get tapped out like that hurts her. It's another bad usage of the casino gauntlet stipulation, because before they made the stupid ass change of saying you had to give somebody a week's notice, I really, really liked what they were doing, which is anytime, anywhere, and they fucked that up, really. It's not good when you have this, and now this is the second time in a row where you have a anytime, anywhere contract, and they don't win a heavyweight championship, and they don't do the smart thing of when they had an edge to actually use it. You know, because Athena did pin on Tony Storm a few weeks ago, and then she had an advantage, and she didn't use it for them, really. So I just think that the match also communicates a bad usage of the briefcase. But overall, I love the match. The positives outweigh the negatives for me. That's why I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Fast tempo. They threw everything at each other. I like how Billy Stark was used. She was minimal. It was not overdone. It was reasonable that they would both hit each other with everything that they got. And I also think that a roll-up would have been a better submission. Would have been a better way to end this, because it would establish that they're both on each other's level, like you did with Okada and Swerve. but it's not to the point of, well, you're gonna have your women's champion that's almost 1,000 days tap out to Tony Storm, and it's like, who's gonna beat Tony Storm? Because you have to have people that can defeat her reasonably. If not, then she's gonna run into that category of just way too invincible, really, and then you can't do anything with her to make her kind of work with anybody else, really. So you have to make sure there's people who can beat Tony Storm. So Hangman versus MJF. MJF, it was really weird because his attire looked like Will Ospreay. So I can understand that he's doing that just to piss off the audience. And imagine what would have happened if he came up, if you had the lights out match as the penultimate, you had that ending with Ospreay, and then you had MJF come out dressed like Will Ospreay just to fuck with people. Like, that would have been a better better continuity, a better setup and payoff. So during the match, MJF is thrown into the ringside area, and Adam Page hits him with a back suplex. They did a lot of action out on the ringside, a lot of action outside of the ring, in the ringside area for a while, past the 10 count rule. So this is also where I deduct points, because they need to stop that. Let's start obeying 10 count rules. Let's make sense of this shit, really. Otherwise, it's like a free-for-all with rules being thrown in whenever they want to. MJF hits a stuffed pile driver, over the top suplex. Hangman hits a top rope lariat, fallaway slam, top rope moonsault, pop-up powerbomb. And MJF yells, "What the fuck," when he gets with a pop-up powerbomb. So this is another thing where they have to talk to him backstage about, because it's interjecting comedy. Is this the fucking 48-hour film project where we're going to see moments where there's stupid-ass comedy or wrestlers don't take something seriously? The same way when you watch the 40-hour film project and the movies that they show there's always seems to be comedy and silly comedy with the majority of their films, really. That's why I kind of call that a 48-hour film project moment, taking away the seriousness. He hits a buckshot. Hangman hits a buckshot lariat. It gets countered by a Fujiwara armbar. MJF hits a hammerlock DDT. MJF hits a chair and cloth. It was one of those things. Oh no, MJF lifts the table and he brings it all the way to like the other side of the ring, and it was actually weird because when he's holding that table, the cloth was like covering his face, really. So it's like saying too, wouldn't it make sense for him to remove the tablecloth? Because when you see like him walk with the tablecloth covering his face, again, it's a 48-hour film project moment where he's trying to be a little silly or be a little funny, and he cannot be doing that because, yes, he's a douchebag, but that just doesn't work. He can even take the cloth, throw it on like people in the audience, and then spit on them, and then take the table and then carry it. He should have done that. Would have been better, a better usage of his choreography. Hangman hits a moonsault. Hits a moonsault. It gets sequenced into a pile driver and Deadeye through a table. And I also said to myself that he put Hangman put MJF through a table. Isn't the stipulation if there's any DQ spots by Hangman that he gets disqualified? So I think that if you have a match that's no DQ for Hangman and he's putting somebody through a table, wouldn't that be a DQ finish? That's like the same with the Chewbacca defense. It does not make sense. MJF does delayed tombstone on the broken table. MJF hits the turnbuckle. Hits the turnbuckle and he bleeds heavily, and the crowd really is starting to go crazy and really love this. So what happened is that they tried to pile driver attempts on each other. They reversed it a bunch of times. There's pinfall reversals, and what happens is that the referee gets knocked out, and there's a lot of this DQ stuff behind his back. And then what happens is that during it, During this, what happens is that MJF gets a 3 count on Hangman Adam Page, but his leg is on the rope. So even Mark Briscoe comes down and says, "Hey, you know what? That's how MJF got me. So we're not gonna. This shit's not gonna continue." I understand they're trying to set up MJF versus Briscoe. So that's why that happened, really. Then Hangman hits him with a briefcase, the Deadeye, and the Buckshot Lariat. And I would kind of say that once again, I do not like the comedy spots, and I really just did not like just the convoluted rules. Hangman in front of the referee puts MJF through a table. Why is he not disqualified when it's no DQ for Adam Page? If they're fighting outside the ring in the ringside area, or MJF is lifting a table, why don't you do something like, okay, you have 5 seconds to drop that table, or you guys are fighting outside the ring for more than 10 seconds. Why aren't they both disqualified, really? So this is where they run into convoluting the rules, really. But I overall, and I agree with I'll say this, I think that, in my opinion, I'll give it 4 out of 5 stars just because I liked it. I think the positive outweigh the negatives. It's a great showing of Hangman Adam Page. A lot of great chaos. This should have been the main event. Even if the main event was the cage match. Even though they had the main event as a cage match, it would have been a good penultimate if this is how they ended the show, really. And that's what they should have done. So I really feel like they made the wrong choice by having this being the penultimate match, really. But it's okay to do things a little bit differently, but just learn, really. And I would also say this: that MJF and Adam Page know how to put on really great matches. MJF can still get his revenge by ultimately having the briefcase, but unfortunately, because they made the stupid ass rule of you can cash it in anytime, anywhere, with a week's notice to the champion. Now you don't have that Money in the Bank type of stipulation, because if they had that, it would just do a lot better, really. So the next thing that they do is that the next match that they have is Alex Windsor, Bozilla, Mercedes, and Persephone. And Mercedes comes out with the Royal Guards holding all of her championships, and she's wearing her ninth championship. So that was cool. This match to me was the match of the night for me. This was an excellent showing of Bozilla. If they want to make this a 5-star match, in my opinion, with how I'm grading things tonight, really, I would say make Bozilla part of the AEW roster. If you want to do a women-on-women blood and guts match, have Bozilla come out as a 5th member on the opponent's team. Have her join the Triangle of Madness, have the Trios women's title, have the tag team women's title. Make Bozilla a star, because if I'm WWE and I'm Triple H, and if you smell what The Rock is cooking, I'll be signing Bozilla so she can whoop some candy ass, in the WWE. So Bozilla became a major star in this show, and I really appreciate that, because that's one of the things you have to do in professional wrestling is make new stars, make interesting people. So if they hire Bozilla, AEW, mission accomplished. If the WWE hires her, mission accomplished for Bozilla and WWE, but she really needs to be considered for bigger spots. Bozilla does a double clothesline, and they did a comedy spot where Mercedes couldn't sweep her legs. I don't like comedy in wrestling matches. They throw Mercedes onto two. She throws Mercedes onto 2 people. She does a side slam on Persephone. She does her role as a big woman, and she does a double back suplex, lifting 2 people. Persephone does a Japanese arm drag. Persephone does a monkey flip and sends Mercedes into Bozilla. Windsor does a senton on Mercedes and Bozilla. Bozilla does a bear hug and then a suplex on Persephone. The crowd cheers the name Bozilla. Mercedes does a meteor on Bozilla. Windsor does a Tower of Doom spot while she's in a in a spot where she's upside down and tied into the ropes. So she uses her legs to do the Tower of Doom spot, which is really cool. Bozilla does a second rope moonsault. Mercedes does a Poison Rana on Bozilla. Persephone does a crucifix powerbomb on Bozilla. Persephone gets pinned by Mercedes. There was like a roll up or like one of the submissions that are hard to get out of. And this is really great action. It was a great showing of Bozilla, and I'm happy for her because she really deserves to be in bigger spots. And that's one of the, like the beauties of Forbidden Door is that you take a wrestler from another company, and you're like, hey, we should just hire her, or they should hire him or her, or whatever their pronouns are, and then you bring them bring them to AEW, or they sign with WWE or other things. Just like last year, what happened with Stephanie Vaquer, and this year you have it with Bozilla, really, and hopefully Bozilla has a bright future. I really believe in her, and she could be another great big woman wrestler. So she can do a lot in NXT, TNA, WWE, or if AEW breaks the bank and decides to sign her and get rid of people who don't do anything like Rubu Soho. Zack Sabre Jr. versus Nigel McGuinness. I hated this match. I don't like matches with a bunch of slow grappling, and they did a bunch of like forearm shots, and it was one of those things too that when there are professional wrestling matches, sometimes there's a bunch of like people punching each other or using forearms or other things. So it's not necessarily like a Blue Thunder Bomb or other like special types of moves, really. So when you have matches like this where you don't have a lot of special types of moves, more of the technical and the grappling stuff, it doesn't hold my interest that much. And I really pray to God if you do Takeshita versus Zack Sabre Jr. at the Wrestle Kingdom show, it's not a bunch of slow grappling like they're in the Roman Olympics or the Greek Roman Olympics or just like the regular Olympics. I hope they actually have some good flips and other things like that. If it's just a bunch of slow grappling, that's not going to be a good look, really. Later on in the match, after I started to get less bored, Zack Sabre Jr. does a cross arm breaker. They exchange uppercuts, and Nigel McGuinness hits a lariat. He calls lariat the left carrot special. Why the fuck is he doing this? It's the same thing with the mollywop. Like, you need to smack him in the face, really, if he came up with that. But you don't call a move or a lariat a left carrot special. That's a fucking stupid ass name, like the mollywop. Nigel McGuinness hits a Tower of London. There's a bunch of quick pinfall attempts. It was a slow-paced match, not to my style of what I like out of professional wrestling. It took a while for more intense professional wrestling moves to happen. So I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. And the other thing that I want to say is that when it comes to the AEW shows, they have a bunch of pre-matches, but I will not be reviewing any of the pre-matches at all unless there's something that I like, really. I didn't even watch it because then the show would be like, it says like 4 or 5 matches that I don't really need to see, really. So it just makes it too much, really. The last one that I have to review for you guys is the Hurt Syndicate versus Bandito versus FTR for the Tag Team Championships. Bobby Lashley does a suplex on FTR. FTR did double team on Bobby Lashley for a while. Bandito hits a Hurricane Rana on Shelton. And I was a little confused because what happened was that they don't really explain how triple tag team matches are supposed to happen. And they need someone to explain that to the audience. Because the way it works is you have 2 people in the ring and then they wrestle each other. They're allowed to go to the ring post. And when they go to the ring post, they can get tagged out by another team or by their partner. And that's how you're supposed to do it. But in this match, when you had all this anarchy and chaos and these things happening outside the ring, I was saying to myself, is this like a tornado tag? Is this a no DQ because you have 3 different people, like a triple threat? It confused the fuck out of me, and that's not a good feeling. You have to have rules. And if there's a bunch of chaos and people not following the rules, even if it's before the match, you have to do something where you have a referee just shout establish order and say, be like, no, motherfuckers, if you don't get your asses in the ring and you don't like follow these rules, then I'm throwing the match out. Or you do another thing where you just throw the match out in general. When you have all this chaos outside the ring before the match starts and it's like something like a triple tag team match, really, you confuse the fuck out of people. Brody King does a delayed vertical suplex on Dax. Bandito counters Shelton Benjamin with suplex attempts. He does a between the ropes dive. Bandito does a top rope dive and tornado tackle on Shelton. Brody does a pop up sidewalk slam on FTR, cannonball on FTR. What happened was they did Bobby Lashley versus Brody. It was almost like Hogan versus Andre, where with just how they let the audience bask in the moment. A lot of people are getting off their seats because they're like, oh my God, it's big man versus big man. Bobby Lashley does a slide slam on Brody King. Brody King gets up and no sells. Brody King does a discus lariat on Bobby Lashley. Shelton Benjamin does a German suplex combination running knee on Bandito. Brody King and Cash do a shatter machine to Shelton. Hurt Syndicate lift Cash and Bobby Lashley do a second rope dive on all three. Bandito grabs Dax and does a fallaway slam off the top rope onto everybody, which looked very vicious. Bobby Lashley does a spear on Lashley. Then two guys come out with New Japan like garb on attacking everybody, and it's later revealed to be Ricochet and the Gates of Agony. So they're trying to create intrigue. Were they sent by MJF? Are they acting on their own? Or are they trying to get revenge because the Hurt Syndicate rejected Bobby Lashley rejected Ricochet a few weeks ago. So, again, and this happened from the referee. So again, they're supposed to have rules to this match, and it's supposed to be it's supposed to have rules, and this is not a no DQ match. Why don't you stop this shit, really? Bandito wins by doing a frog splash and a double team move with Brody on Dax. The referee botches the 3 count, then he does another 3 count. I gave this match 4 out of 5 stars because there was a lot of botches, there was a lot of disorganization to this match. But, fuck you guys, this is my list, bitches. So the thing about it is there were a lot of great spots. You had big power spots between Brody King and Bobby Lashley, which people wanted to see. That was like dream spots. You can set up Brody King versus Bobby Lashley in the future. And then the other part of it is that you made a really great call by having Brodito win because Bandito has done a lot for AEW, especially holding Ring of Honor together, being a great champion, having great matches. This is a great reward for all the work he's doing. He did an excellent job at the Arena Mexico event, and then also with like issues with Mexican immigrants and all that stuff. You have a anti-ice in Brody King, and then you have obviously anti-ice with Bandito. That's a good look for the company because obviously this is a company of also inclusion, really. So you can have MJF and other people be like, oh, well, I'm also against your politics and create something on this. And then you have a white man in Brody King being anti-ice. And then you have a Mexican and Bandito being anti-ice. And that's a good look, really. There could be stories you can tell off of this. And then also, too, that Brody King and Bandito do a lot of great stuff, and they're really great players with other people. And then you do rematch with Bobby and Shelton, which I believe would happen at All Out, really. There's a lot of great things, really. So I think that they were the right people. They're the right baby faces. They put in a lot of work. They have great performances. This is good for Bandito because he's the ROH champion. And if Shelton and Bobby want to lose to legitimate people, you have the powerhouse Brody Lee, and then you have the ROH champion in Bandito. So this does not hurt Shelton and Bobby to lose to them anytime, really. They should be shaking their hands, really. So salute. So overall, a really great show. Jamie Hayter comes back. Wardlow comes back as well, really. And I think they have a lot of great momentum going into Wembley Stadium next year, even though the ending was a little, fucked up with Will Ospreay, being hurt. That did hurt them a lot, really. But I think the positives outweigh the negatives, really. So if I was to give this a rating, F- to A+, this show was not an A+. It was not an F-. It was not a D. It was not a C. I would kind of say it's in the A- range, but because they fucked up the main event with Will Ospreay, nah, fuck it. I think that B+ is more fair, but they kind of did a lot more positives than negatives. You're reestablishing the tag team division. You have a bunch of women fighting on the show, so you're reestablishing the women's division. You had Bozilla in a very strong spot. They really gave a fuck. They really gave a fuck because they needed to do a good show because Wembley Stadium's next year, and then they also had 19,000 people, and that's one of their biggest shows that they ever done, non All Out or non their WrestleMania really. So I think that fairly speaking, this was an A minus pay per view for AEW, and if you don't like that, you can suck it.